My name is Ruben Zimmermann from the Johannes Gutenberg-Universität of Mainz, Germany. I'm teaching New Testament and ethics.
Dr. Ruben Zimmermann. Ruben, good to see you. Welcome to Exegetically Speaking.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here at the Linear Theological Library. Wish you could stay longer, but quick impressions of the place. What are your thoughts about this place?
It's an amazing place. I could not expect something like that here in Houston, so I'm really enjoying it being here.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you, and you're going to be heading up to Yale in a few days to spend a bit of time there. But you've written a wonderful books dealing with the parables and the Gospels, and we're going to be talking about those on another podcast. Today, on Exegetically Speaking, we're about language. So how did you get started reading Greek?
So according to the humanist thoughts and Reformation in Germany, we start learning ancient languages right at the beginning of our studies. So and not only Greek and Hebrew, but also Latin. And so it takes about 2 years. And we translate in Greek also philosophers like Plato or historians like Herodotus or Xenophon. And so I would like to shorten this a bit and took an intensive language course together with my girlfriend and later wife. And so we tried hard, but I was also too busy and somehow lazy in that time. So she was worried that I maybe not pass the exam. And she helped me to highlight some passages of the 200-book Xenophon Anabasis. And the day before the exam, I read through, and one passage attracted my attention. So I read some more pages, and exactly this passage was chosen for the written exam.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so I had good luck, and of course I still had to translate it, but as soon as you have an idea about a text, and it was a difficult text with irony and also with indirect speeches, but it helps a lot. So At the end of the day, I came out with an A+.
Oh, wonderful.
And my wife only with some B-.
Oh, no!
And that was unfair, so it caused our first partnership crisis, but we managed it. And
somehow you muddled through that.
Yes, and now I'm happily married for more than 30 years.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Well, reading any language is not necessarily a solitary enterprise. It takes more people. It takes a group of people to encourage and such. And so I'm glad that you had your future wife at that particular point taking care of you. And wish she could have made something more than a B-, though. That seems a little unfair. Hey, so today we're going to be looking at John chapter 20, verse 15. And this is the resurrection story that comes out of John's gospel. It's unique in many ways to the gospel record. And you're working on John's gospel for a new book on ethics in John as well. So we look forward to that and coming back and maybe talking about that. So what's happening here in this text that draws your attention and our attention today?
Yes, in John 20, Mary Magdelene showed up at the empty tomb, and she was afraid, so she called for Peter and the beloved disciple, who first entered the tomb and then disappeared again. So Mary was left alone, and she saw Jesus standing there, but did not recognize him. And so I read verse 15. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And I'm attracted by this information, dokusa hoti hokepuros estin in Greek. So she supposed him to be the gardener. And Most scholars do not really care about the gardener here. To think it might be just an information that it's located in the garden, so it's a mistaken identity maybe, or it's mentioned for novelistic detail of the narrative style. But I think there's more in there.
Okay. There's something more.
Yes.
So what is that something more that you think is there?
I will argue that this mentioning of the gardener is somehow a link to a symbolic meaning, and which links back to Genesis 1-3.
Okay. So the Garden of Eden.
Exactly.
We read about, the creation story is in Genesis 1, the 6 to 7 days of creation with the day of rest. And then in chapter 2, we begin to get information about this wonderful garden of life that's there.
Exactly. And I think this garden plays a role in John as well.
Okay.
We do not find any information about a garden in the synoptic tradition. So it was
that the tomb is located
yes.
in a garden. I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
And John mentioned the garden already in John 18 with this Greek word kepos. And most scholars think it's not said. The other word we know from the Greek tradition is paradeisos. And paradeisos, of course, we know also in our language is paradise.
Paradise
Means garden, but it's the Garden of Eden. And this word is not used in John. Therefore, some scholars conclude that must be a normal garden and not a reference. And I looked in the Septuagint and I found out that there are many references to both terms, paradeisos as well as kepos, in a symbolic meaning.
So are they used as synonyms then? The two words mean roughly the same thing.
And they can be used in the same source, for instance, in Ezekiel, and also in a normal way, but also in a symbolic way. And that symbolic way means that God himself is the gardener. As we know from Genesis 2 and 3, he planted the garden, he cultivated it. And he's also in Numeri, for instance, 24-26, he's also named as the gardener.
So is it possible then that this word keporos, referring to Jesus here in the garden, in right outside the tomb, is then a reference back to God and a connection between the one God and also the one Son? Is there a connection there, you think?
I would go that far. And we have also some bridging texts in early Judaism in that time, for instance, in Qumran. We find in the Hodayot 8, 4, and 5 that the righteous teacher is meant to be the gardener in the everlasting garden to come. Or in the Testament Levi, it's even the Messiah who opens the sealed gate to paradise again. And so it could also refer to the Messiah or the teacher of the righteous teacher. But I think in John, as we have John 1, where the Logos is Theos, it's God, and also Thomas later on in the chapter itself also confesses, you are truly my Lord and my God. So I think there are good reasons to say that Jesus is also meant as the gardener like God himself. And I would argue, for instance, in John 5, where Jesus talks about the relationship with his Father, and both of them can have the ability to bring and make alive. With the Greek term zoopoieo. So it's really making life in a literally sense.
Yeah.
And so it said he can do that, Jesus, as his Father. And so that's also
a very high claim.
Yeah.
By anybody. And then you have all of the I am statements that you see throughout. The I am the door, I am the gate, I am the the way, the truth, the life. And then you have the absolute, before Abraham was, I am. So there are very high claims being made in John about the identity of Jesus.
Yes, I wrote my second book on the Christology in John and referred in particular to the I am sayings and the metaphors. And so one of my argument was that by means of these metaphors, Jesus is also brought on the level of God himself. Using, for instance, in John 10, the shepherd. The shepherd is well known as a metaphor for God. And so, even more as this shepherd is the owner of the sheep. And that's reserved to God himself in the Hebrew Bible.
Fantastic. Well, that's a wonderful reading of this text. And I had never seen that before. I had never really understood that reference to she supposing him to be the gardener. In fact, she was thinking beyond and thinking also back to the garden and the garden that was planted in the Garden of Paradise.
Yes, I can. I think it's like that. On the other hand, we see the way it's said. It's pure Johannine theology and language. It's not a statement, a proposition, but it's supposing to be, or as we talked about the I am saying. So these are images and symbols in this gospel, and that means that is a language which is not univoque, as we say as scholars, but equivocal. So it can have different meanings. Is in that way the reader himself is invited to find his or her own reading, and you cannot convince to say, "Oh, you must read it like this,"
yes,
and
right.
It's the only possibility. So it's a hint how to understand it, and some can see the relation to the Garden of Eden, others maybe not. But I think that's exactly the way John explores and develops theology.
Yeah, all the way through. Wonderful. Well, we're grateful today that you were here, Dr. Ruben Zimmermann, with us today on Exegetically Speaking. Thanks for being with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to Ruben Zimmermann for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking. You know, I admire anybody who can walk into a podcast when it is not their language and be able to field the questions and handle that. English is not his first language. German is, and he did a brilliant job. Thanks, Ruben, for that wonderful reading. Thanks as well to Phil Kagi for our music. His music always adds something, some great textures and sounds to our podcast. There's a world of meaning and connections yet to be made when you read the Bible in the original languages. You get that from this podcast, I hope. And if you're interested in learning, then Wheaton College is the best place to go, hands down. Look in our show notes for how to get started. I mean, details about what you need to know. And remember, today is the day. Don't let another day go by before you contact us here at Wheaton College. Until next time, I'm David Capes, and thanks for listening.